this meeting to order. Welcome everybody for joining our September VAUDA meeting, which quite possibly might be our last meeting of the year. I think possibly. We've been making a lot of great progress. So what I'd like to do, I don't really have any welcoming comments besides lots of great work has been happening behind the scenes, and you'll hear some of that today. We do have Laura joining us virtually. So we need to vote on virtual participation. So I need to motion that we accept Laura to be able to participate electronically. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Laura, you are granted access virtually. So
Thank you.
I wonder if that would ever go wrong and then someone has to awkwardly be deleted out of the meeting. Okay, so next we'll go to the approval of the previous minutes, which I'm sure everyone studiously read. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes from the previous meeting? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, we accept the minutes from the previous meeting. Okay, moving on to Mr. Gullickson. Any updates from the governor's offshore wind coordination team?
Yeah, I mean, the update was the meeting was postponed or canceled for this month. But I will take this opportunity just to briefly give everyone a quick update on where we stand here at the port in regards to continue progress at Portsmouth Marine Terminal. We are now over the 40% mark of completion for the CVAL or the Dominion footprint of 72 acres in preparation of the arrival of the first monopiles come early October. So very excited that. Well, yeah. But I can just say, obviously, a lot of hard work, a lot of collaboration going on between Dominion, the contractor, Skanska, obviously our team here at the port. And we are in full mode of getting ready to receive those first monopiles. So we will receive 8 monopiles here in early October. So be on the lookout. As you know, they're coming across the Atlantic from Germany. And so the schedule is what the schedule is, and obviously cooperating with weather windows and whatnot. But we'll see them here shortly, and definitely be on the lookout for probably some form of a announcement or just sort of a press release on the first arrival, the first vessel. And yeah, that's all I got.
Do you have any shareable updates about seeing?
Well, at this point, we have an agreement for them to lease a footprint at Portsmouth Marine Terminal and construct a blade finishing facility previously. So.
We should be.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I think it's getting them off of from origin. Yes, Eileen. I believe the image I saw this week, and I said 6, and I knew it was an even number. I want to say they're 4 across, and they're 2 deep on the vessel because each one, say we'll call them 200 feet long, and so I think they have 2. I want to say it's 8, could be 6, but so hopefully that's not a test. But it's either 6 or 8, but I do think it's 8. I think there are 4 wide on the vessel. Yeah, so you'll start seeing them every month. Correct. Yeah, so every month we'll start to receive.
Stuff costs so much.
Yeah, and it'll be really exciting just to kind of start seeing them build up their idle stock. And it seems from the Dominion, and I don't know if there's going to be a Dominion update, if there's Dominion representative, but project obviously tracking accordingly, and there would be the beginnings of the in-water installation taking place once the window opens up in 2024 after the moratorium for the right well migration. So yeah, here we go. It's happening.
And we circulated to members the news summary that was prepared for the offshore wind coordination team meeting that was canceled this month, which there's a lot of reading there, which follow all the links, but that was probably going to be the focus of most of the discussion at that cabinet level meeting if it had been delayed. And I guess Virginia had good news in there compared to many other states. many other reports. At least Dominion continues to report the project is on time and on budget.
Thank you for sharing that report. It's really good.
Yeah, that was all public information sources. Sometimes we prepare analysis that is governor's working papers and we can't share. But that and the federal funding opportunity newsletter that was created by Ed, shared, all of those are public sources of information. And frankly, we will be flooding you with a lot of that. There's a lot more that we haven't shared all of it, but start sharing more and more related to R&D, related to power offtake, related to workforce, and related to all of the topics of interest to the authority. Brian, at some point. Enough.
Offshore with the TV.
Well, thank you, Chris, for that update.
Yes, sir.
Moving over now to the 2023 annual report for Al. And if I do recall last time we talked, this is now a much more streamlined report, right? As for the direction of the new director. So go ahead, Al.
Yeah, well, just a reminder on that point. There was guidance issued by our director or the governor's office to change the size of annual reports because, and this one's not much more than Bowers last year. Because Bowers was not one of the annual reports that went on for 100, even 200 pages in one case, with appendices on top of that. So this report is not much shorter, if any, than last year's. The guidance in general is to report in the annual reports that have to be approved by the governor's office, received by the governor's office, sent to the General Assembly committee members that are identified in the legislation. That they would like those to be much briefer than in the past because they just don't have the bandwidth to review a 200-page document closely and do the back and forth that takes sometimes with policy people looking at it and others looking at it and asking questions, suggesting changes, edits. So, but to reiterate, they have said multiple times, many people in the administration, this body and bodies like this, your advice is wanted and needed, just not in the annual report. To the extent that some authorities have been doing in the past. So the approach that you are taking now with these breakout groups and the research from those, while it's probably more voluminous, Kathy, than we've seen, you pulled it down to a few pages, but there's a lot more behind that, I know, and same thing with what Howard has worked on and what Eileen has worked on. That's what they would prefer. That way, they don't have to review it and deal with it in a voluminous report. That being said, Ken is obviously caught in traffic, but he put together this first draft so that you would have a chance to include it at this meeting. And I'm expecting that would take, if you agree, if having reviewed it, and at this meeting, if you don't see things that you think doesn't need a lot of discussion or change, then you could authorize the Department of Energy to revise the report for the discussion and direction at today's meeting. And then we would not have to vote again. We could submit it. Meet the deadline of October 15th. And it's fair, but so was last year's. And really the meat of it are the 6 recommendations in the first couple of pages. They are very similar to the recommendations in last year's report. Ken tweaked them a little bit because we knew we had more information from the R&D SWOT analysis and recommendations. Of course, All of them can't fit on a paragraph recommendation, but can try to capture the gist of that. And today there'll be more that may be done. And I don't know that we've done justice yet to Howard's report. That's the recommendation 4. I don't know that that's been changed a lot, or if it needs to be changed. That's, up for your consideration. And then after that, we put in the bare minimum mission and objectives and background of the authority. There's more in the appendix. And we eliminated there used to be 2 or 3 levels of activities. Out activities have always been what is expected of a report. But in addition to that, over the years, and including last year, we've included industry updates that Valley had nothing to do with. Except, suffering the good, the bad, and enjoying the good, like everyone else. So we've eliminated that. And then the summaries of the meetings, I believe, serve a dual purpose. We can use those to provide links to other documents. So they're not part of this and requiring extensive review by high level folks in the administration. And then the appendix is what it was last year. There were some letters of comment that were attached in last year's report. And Ken, I think you said there was only one.
Not like any.
Couldn't find any that bounced up this year. You said a bunch of them late last year. And so that really is the overview. And so I open it to you now. Were you thinking about this? Happy with it? Is it a disaster and you wish we had given it to you? Start from scratch, come back in a month.
Yes, I'll start. I'll open it up for discussion. I've reviewed the document. I thought it was good. I thought it was what we wanted to do. I mean, the only thing I noticed probably a few formatting type things, but like that's basically it. I even thought in the section about the meetings, figured there's probably some of the meeting summaries could likely be shortened even more. But that was basically it. I think overall, the bones of it and the meat of it, I think meet the intent. I'm happy to accept it as is with, and we can talk about this later, and I'll plan on moving to have about a staff or Virginia Energy staff be able to make revisions without needing a valid vote. But before we talk about that, is there any other comments about the annual report?
And thank you for pointing out the formatting and editing and the style. Lynn is on vacation. She's always done that for us. Ken and I really struggle with it. You move one thing and it files up something else. So, yeah, I should have mentioned that
Yeah,
before.
it's fine. Very
We'll
much.
fix it.
Very much.
I'll just echo those comments and say that generalizations in this report, I think is favorable. And keeping actual items to the white papers, I think that's what the administration wants. And I think that's easier on everyone and more effective.
I think that the item 4, the valid activities, and really, of course, having recommendation 4 up in the second page is no text. Presentation 9 was really more towards what barriers are there, what pathways are there, getting more opportunities for offshore wind in Virginia and other nearby locations. So I think it's hard for, I will give an update on some off thinkers, but I think maybe it needs to shift waver a little bit more towards, but again, I think, the title of my presentation was pathways forward for future on offshore wind projects that are connecting Virginia, identify barriers and opportunities for that. Maybe it's too general topic, but it seems like, large data centers, I'm not, I don't think we're going to be contacting individuals, and frankly, I think that's the role of the developers. A lot of this, and I feel like I'm sort of doing a second look on behalf of other things that probably are pretty evident. to developers themselves. So I think maybe just a little more generalized, and I can work on some language so that the problems make it simple. I think that maybe more of an active scope. Maybe even just.
Maybe it's more just working with developers to understand the constraints and those kind of things to make sure that the state is open for. They are able to go and actually enter into power purchase agreements with varieties, to make sure everything the state is doing is setting it up for this to happen.
Right, as long as it's different aspects, it's not just talking to operators.
Well,
Right.
one of the
Yeah.
things that, based on your comment, I just thought about is like right after the word identify or possible, I just added identify pathways and barriers to possible
Yeah.
power off takers. And that kind of
Yeah, I think you could
captures.
skip the rest such as. I think all of it such as is. So maybe just generalize it because it could be, as was pointed out, the comments on my presentation, there could be big healthcare, there could be others that, we're leaving off the list. And I think that most likely on the school tends to be the government, the DOD and so forth. So we can just generalize that.
And I think I understood you to say how it's also broaden beyond just possible power off takers as your presentation did.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's regulatory barriers and it's. I think the way Will said it, whatever you said.
Identify pathways and.
Pathways and barriers to possible power off takers.
And that's where, with clean energy commitments.
Laura has a comment, question.
Yeah, I thought the report looked really good. This is a really minor comment, but on recommendation number 3 at the top of page 2, at last EG, it says impacts of hurricanes, marine life and commercial fishing. I would just say impacts of hurricanes and impacts on marine life. It makes it sound like we're talking about the impacts of marine life on wind as opposed to the opposite. It looks really good. Thank you.
Okay. We had the word on.
And on.
Howard, were you asking for a revision on about activity support and recommendation support, or just about activity support?
I think.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Why not?
But I'd like to maybe suggest, well, before I do that, does anybody else have any other like burning
I
comments?
just have an observation, looking at recommendation number 5. And I kind of look to staff to understand where we stand in regards to the Smart Power MOU, and if that is even something at this point relevant to a recommendation if there's not much meat behind it.
I don't think there's any harm in leaving it. It's covered in other areas about, advancing the industry and the supply chain. If you wanted to shorten it, we're still actively participating in the MOU, but it's not as high profile as it was in the administration that, created it and approved it. So we're working, but we're still working with those other states in the region on goals that we all share, that where that makes sense. And we, we're not like trading
What if there's,
contacts with potential business investors or anything like that. So it's where it makes sense to cooperate, like at the IPF, the big North American Wind Conference, that is basically a big marketing effort and an opportunity for states, including Virginia, to have a presence there. So we still use the Smart Power banner and work with Maryland and North Carolina to help balance for Virginia and the southern part of the Mid-Atlantic with what's happening in the Northeast, where there are similar MOUs and partnerships between states that have invested a great deal of money in off of incentives. So that was one of the major reasons for smart power in the first place.
Well, then I wonder if maybe, because I still think there's just, I get it that there's a three-party and we've marketed together, but I still sometimes challenge to find what the value is. And so I almost wonder if there's a way to add a sentence in there to further define benefits and values in support of, because I'm just putting that out there. I'm not, again, this is just an observation. If we're going to have it in here, and there could be some opportunity. I mean, there's some synergy between North Carolina. We all know that, and we've experienced that. But
It sounds like it's two things.
Yeah.
To Al's point, the state's going to continue to actively support and participate in, then we should still have a line in
Yeah,
there of
yeah.
we're supporting it. But to your point, I think it's a both and is we then say, okay, but yes, let's probably dig in a little bit more about how to best utilize the smart power relationship.
I mean, it'd be interesting to go, and I serve on both, so the North Carolina Tower as well as this, we could potentially have a combo meeting.
love it. Yeah, I will say the NC Tower is impressive. I mean, I had presented to them this year down in Raleigh, and a very impressive gathering of engaged stakeholders within the state of North Carolina. So
This did come up in our discussion and it was revolving around now RDC. And my notes here have Al as the point guard on that. And if there's possibly a new project to build off of the Virginia supply chain and using the smart power region with NREL leading. So I think in the white paper, one of the, when we get to it, one of the recommendations in the white paper is to leverage Virginia's membership in now RDC. And that would be part of that by participating more in this and some of the other subcommittees that over later when we go over that. So I'm not sure if that's covered more in the white paper and more of a generalization in the annual report.
yes,
I recommend we leave it as is, but we know that in 2020, now to 20 through 2024, but the annual report for 2024 will have a whole different spin on what that looks like for smart power. Make that decision there.
I'm reading it right now. It's as if the smart power MOU is the only vehicle by which we engage in workforce.
Well, to Kathy's point on the white paper, I think is something more appropriate to get into the details more. And what the recommendation on the now RDC, part of the increased funding, there is some funding that Virginia already committed and transferred to the now RDC that's unspent. And there was a commitment to provide more than we have already transferred to the now RDC. So one of the jobs for Virginia Energy will be now to go back and talk about that. Can we come up with additional money, or can we use the money that's still in the kitty? Because as members of now RDC, we do have a significant steering power with that, so we could direct that money to a project that benefits Virginia, like that smart power state. They've added Delaware, now it's 4 states that are looking at a regional supply chain study and workforce gap analysis based on a national one that was done by NREL. So you're right, that connection with the now RDC was a funding connection.
Just generalize this a bit, to say cooperative arrangements among states that advance the future of offshore wind. Just leave it open because it may be a different variety of different vehicles. Not leave off like the workforce development and all that.
Thoughts, comments?
only to Eileen's point, and that is that I wonder when we talk about, I think that she's right. I read through all five real quickly, and that is the only place that workforce is mentioned. So she's hit it. I thought I was going to catch you, but I didn't. In recommendation number 2, however, we talk about all stakeholders, and stakeholders do include workforce. So maybe that is where we're going to narrow down what we say in 5. We just simply go and make sure we allude to, maybe that's where we do the Hampton Roads Workforce Council as one of the partners in there to go and identify that workforce as part of this as a stakeholder.
What about in recommendation 2, you just at the end of get place, so continue to work with all stakeholders to create a regional supply chain, insert and workforce.
And workforce.
Check,
Yeah.
done.
I think workforce is part of the supply chain, but that's
Absolutely.
point, yeah. Including workforce.
All right, so let me ask this question because it's where I want to go.
Yeah.
Is there any other, what I'll call just like major glaring issues, omissions from the report? Because it is meant to be a little bit more of a summary of like the last year and some of what we're moving forward on. So I do like how we did further define some things. Okay, what I'd like to do,
If we have stuff, should we just send them between now and the next meeting for you?
so here's the context, right?
Okay, great. We have to-
What I want to do is allow, I want to allow Virginia Energy staff to clean this up, do some happy glads, do some things, and that's it. And we vote to allow them to do that so that we don't have to
Yeah.
vote and actually literally call another meeting, vote on this, right? So that's what I'd like to avoid. That's why the bigger part, if there's anything that needs to be discussed as far as content pieces, rather do that now.
I think with the discussions we've had regarding recommendation number 2 and adding and workforce in the final sentence.
Yep.
Recommendation 3, adding and impacts on marine life at the end. Narrowing down recommendation number 4 as well as 4 in Nevada activities to talk about pathways and barriers.
Yep.
And eliminating all the utilities, military, blah, 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 but just with clean energy commitments. Those, and then a little, we didn't really say what it was going to be for the smart power, but just a little bit of refining that. And we can allow the,
I think for that, it would be continue to support and further define the relationship and
Yeah.
benefit of the tri-state smart power.
that sounds good to me.
And that's again, another few words. that-
I'll move with those recommendations. We move forward with this as an annual report.
Okay.
Allowing staff to happy glad.
Yes. So I guess the formal motion, I will move to allow Virginia Energy to make, revise and accept this document as discussed. And basically then we do not have to vote on it anymore.
Smooth.
All right, can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed to this idea? And you just really want another meeting? All right.
September, I was thinking.
Let's get set before. It's a great question.
It goes to, money committees, I believe, and,
Yeah.
others,
After recommendation 6, it says it, as per the code, it goes, the annual report goes to the governor as well as the chairs of House Appropriations and Senate Finance and the House and Senate Commerce and Labor Committees. So all finance, commerce and labor in the governor's office. It's not-
You guys also combine it with your annual reports, is that correct?
we used to, but, we don't have a division of offshore winds. So we are, for our division of offshore wind, backstop. Well, yes, we did, but it was still basically the ballot report with a few other divisions.
Okay. Moving along, you're gonna hear 2 things, great update from Kathy on everything we've been doing with R&D. And then we'll discuss the white paper that has been circulated in your packet, that we would attach to this annual. Yeah.
Do we want to go through the slide deck point by point of where we came up with our recommendations for the white paper? Said that,
It's up to you. I don't know if
do
it.
you have a Tita? There it is.
Already got on the train?
Yeah. You have a slide deck, makes sense?
Yeah.
the R and D.
No, it's not, yeah. No, that's for physical, that's yours.
Keep going. I think there's a few slides at the beginning, right?
Yeah, well, that's why I think it got merged together as.
Your slide deck from,
It's not-
previous R&D,
A couple days, yeah.
okay.
While they're looking for that, I'll note, and it's captured a little bit in the annual report. Had several good meetings recently talking about this. We had in August 7th and August 21st. It's really good meetings, and I think we did a deeper dive than I've seen before. So I think it was time well spent to be able to further define kind of what we're doing. Similar on those lines. So ODU is also seeking a grant that will help support a lot of this R&D activity. Yeah, and one of the things, so they reached out to us and asked for some support. So one of the things you did not see, but I'm telling you about it. So myself as the chair and Kathy as the R&D sub chair, we signed a letter of support for this R&D grant because it was due tomorrow, I think, or no, it was actually
11th,
last week.
Monday.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
last week. And something that we didn't have to come here, discuss, really, and then be late on. So we were advised by Virginia Energy staff that as long as it was specific from myself and Kathy, then we did not need to bring it to the board. But just know, it saved you some reading on some R&D grant language. So we're being supportive and trying to be a little more responsive to it.
All right, thanks. So you can go to the next slide. So if you recall what we did, we had some recommendations, and the recommendation from those was to prioritize them. And so we did that. We looked at simple or urgent, who if required, input from. And so we divided it into what we can get done quickly in 2023 and what we're pushing to 2024. So the first of those is to revise the objective actions, and we did that. We worked on that, the workshop did, took a couple inputs and have the revised language on the next page. That does not require valid vote. So our workshop, our committee did that, and we have revised language for the objective actions for our objective, not changing the objective language, only the action language. The next one is a list the Bowen constraints for research. There's a plan of action for that. And we've already accomplished the first one. We've gotten all the documents for that. And we will be continuing to go through that plan of action to complete that, that recommendation. These are all in the white paper. I'm just going through them one by one, explaining how we got to our recommendations. The next one is determining the value of the Now RDC membership. We had representatives from Now RDC. They gave a really great presentation, and the committee decided that there's very good value in maintaining our relationship and our membership with Now RDC. And some of the things that we had talked about during during the workshop were what we had just mentioned, the new supply chain project, building off of the NREL project, and using the smart power region and now as the point guard on that. So we also learned that they will be having a symposium this year in December of 2023. And they mentioned that they're having a symposium possibly in California in 2024. So we are actually going to look to see if Virginia can be the host of the 2024 symposium. That's going to require more conversations with Now RDC and more involved participation with them. And on the next slide was our continued recommendation was, if we found that our membership in Now RDC was valuable, how do we leverage it? And there's again, a couple of, a plan of action, how to do that. We did learn new actionable items from these reps. And one of the recommendations included, in addition to this slide deck, was involvement with the State Action Network. And these are just state members. So they meet separately. There's a couple of other subcommittees that they mentioned that we would like to see more involvement on as far as our Virginia reps go. And that's the R&D committee meetings. And of course, pushing to host the 2024 symposium in Virginia. I think probably seeing how the symposium looks in 2023, we can better gauge, do we want to host it in 2024 or do we want to wait? So anyway, that's not a recommendation to host it. It's a recommendation to continue investigating Virginia hosting the 2024 symposium. Next slide. We had reps from several other research organizations, ROSA and RWSC, and came out with recommendations from that was to, these organizations do a lot of R&D and it's very collaborative. So what our recommendation is to participate more, have our Virginia reps participate more in these organizations and share their information that they receive from that across the different departments. There's very little of that being done now, so that is our recommendation to increase the sharing across departments of information that comes from these and opportunities that come from these organizations. Considering the sponsorship in ROSA, RWSC brought up a state caucus that they have that we're recommending to participate in and consider a contribution to RWSC. There's no requirement for that, but many states do contribute. And we may find it is in our best interest to contribute in order to get more aligned R&D opportunities and more of them coming to Virginia businesses. And we also spoke of vehicles in order to do that and possibly creating a valid budget in order to do that rather than it comes directly from the Department of Energy. And that's just going to require further conversations. And so finally, the next to last point is to create the white paper. And one of those points includes, so from our matrix, one of the items that was shown for 2024 looked like it could be an opportunity for 2023 when the governor announced the grant for the offshore wind manufacturers. So our recommendation is to look at that because BEDP is just getting it off the ground now. To look and see how they're working with that and how is it assisting? What is the success criteria for that grant, and see if it would be in our best interest and Virginia's best interest to increase that grant and do a set aside for R&D, for manufacturing, research and development, technology, research and development as far as it relates to manufacturing. And then finally, it was the department providing VALDA a legislative and budget matrix that we can follow. And when we find the need or requirement, or there's asked to either write letters of support or non-support for some of these items. So we can move on to the white paper.
In case you have not seen it yet, but the white paper is essentially a summary of everything Kathy just said. So
The white paper is again actionable items for our different committees, our 4 objectives and the committees that support those 4 objectives. In this case, most of the work has been done for just two of them. It's R&D and then Howard's industry barriers. So this is the only, these are the only two objectives that this white paper covers. And the recommendations, again, for R&D are the ones that I just covered. And what, and why are they pertinent? They're pertinent because our efforts have to align with the state administration's offshore wind energy priorities, which the Department of Energy provided to us. And, you know, I don't know if you want to go over these, but real quickly, their administration priorities for offshore wind are: one, deploy offshore wind projects affordably; two, identify opportunities for completion or competition or other cost-saving mechanisms; three, attract offshore wind supply chain to Virginia; four, mitigate impact on fisheries, tourism, and other marine commerce. Their 5 focus areas are affordability, reliability, environmental stewardship, competition, and innovation. And all of our recommendations point directly at these focus areas. And Howard, yours, do you want to come? You're going to cover yours, correct? So these were our recommendations on this, on the white paper. They're actionable items for BAUDA and for the Department of Energy to take. And then we're going to vote on this white paper, correct? Okay. So does anybody have any questions about the R&D portion of the white paper? Like to thank everybody that participated in the workshops. Jennifer was kind enough to give some very great insight. Everybody did. The presentations by some of these organizations were fantastic. And I thank everybody that participated.
I don't have a question about the white paper specific to that, but I just went on their website and I don't know when NOWR or now RDC's 23, they don't have their 23 conference on their website.
They announced it at the workshop.
When is
A
this?
symposium in December.
Okay, that's what I was missing.
Laura has a question, comment?
Yeah, Kathy, just curious, did Renee Riley from ROSA ever get back to you with some slides on the benefits of ROSA, I hope?
I have to go back.
Not to me directly. Not to me directly.
Okay, I hadn't heard from her either. I'll try to follow up with her when I get back from Massachusetts.
But she was on the
On the call.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, with ROSA. I just when I was presenting the benefits, what's the advantage of joining ROSA? I think I only had like one slide, and she was going to provide some more benefits. So I'll try to track those down from her.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have some notes here about some of the subcommittees that she recommended. If we wanted to have a little more participation and try to align some of their activities with Virginia's focus areas.
And I will say, because we talked about it, you note there's a lot of keywords here like consider, explore. The fiscal conservative hat coming on is we're not looking to necessarily just be a fund for all these other things. We're trying to find out what makes sense. You know, and it even goes back to our conversation about smart power. It goes back to our discussion about some of these other things about how can Virginia plug into the things that'll actually add value to everything we're doing. And if some things don't add value, then we're not looking to get involved in them, right? So just so that's clear. And again, thank you to Kathy for all the work that she's done on this, because the recommendations, especially how we look at what is in code for what BAUDA is supposed to do, and then also aligning with the administration's kind of efforts on offshore wind. It's one of the things we're supposed to be doing is making subject matter expert led recommendations. So that is exactly what this white paper intends to do. So unless there's any other questions on R&D, pause, turn it over to Howard to kind of cover. You could probably, if you want, you could cover both an update to your work plan section and then cover your portion of the white paper as well. if that makes sense.
What Kathy did for
Yeah, exactly.
the topic. Yeah. Just wanted to give an update on some further conversations I've had and further research I've done regarding the barriers and incentives and so forth. Executive Order 14057, which was issued in 2021, is set very bold goals for federal government usage of carbon pollution free electricity and so forth. And it requires it have for each agency to have specific goals, plans and so forth. I think that, I've looked for a DoD plan, for example, and I'm not finding it, maybe still proprietary somehow is being developed and so forth, but that is, the preface for targeting federal agencies and DoD, the potential off-takers, because there's this impetus to do this sorts of contracting that can achieve this. When you're trying to do 100% carbon pollution free electricity on net annual basis by 2030, that's pretty significant. So I think that I had a conversation with the NASA at headquarters of their energy responsibilities. And I think he said that really a lot of agencies are collectively scratching their heads at how can you accomplish this if you don't have some kind of better procurement avenues for getting green power contracted for use in your facilities. And really he appealed this very bright ideas that we would have about things that are not in the books. I mean, DoD is fortunate because it does have authority to enter into 30-year contracts for the acquisition of energy. So one thought is, I talked to NASA, could they glom on to NASA, that is, glom on to some sort of DoD contract that would be with offshore wind developers and free rider on that. It's like cooperative agreement or something other than a procurement mechanism. So, but that, the executive order creating an impetus for acquisition of green power is, I think it has within the government itself some barriers. So that was interesting insight because that's the way they're to at NASA and other similar agencies that do have significant energy usage. Other updates, he is negotiating for there being a switching station on Oceana property and speculations there might be some kind of backup power emergencies if the grid fails and they're going to have the switching station there and they get direct backup power. That's just a third-hand piece of information. But I think the action is going to be largely related in this context with the Navy and Mid-Atlantic region continues to be the place to inquire the call into a person who's in charge of that for several days later. So I'm not getting any call back. But once I do, I can turn the report in future meeting on that.
You connect with Rick at Arumpa.
Oh, yeah. He gave you the contact for the Atlantic program as a energy person. So, and the NASA person came out of the Navy and they're so he's going to see if there's somebody that can do it to get more information.
The deputy secretary for energy and installations was just in town.
Sorry.
The deputy secretary of the Navy for installation of energy was just in town Monday and Tuesday. Yeah.
That's interesting. Is that something you can next or something?
No, they're more here to talk about fuels. Red Hill and what's going on with how Navy's list fuels.
So it is tantalizing that NASA shares the fence with Langley Air Force Base, and it's natural to bring in NASA on some of these things, but so far it's not obvious to them how they can directly procure on a long-term basis from offshore wind and other facilities. So very constrained. At most, I'm thinking what they can do directly is trying to slide in some solar on in their centers. That's what they call their bases. And, but that can't possibly meet the load. They have even at that individual center. So that's just a little more information, and I hope to get some more from the lady. I think that's the big win is talking to them more. I think that without this. On another topic that's addressed in the white paper, I've been in touch with Al about the ongoing communications that Virginia Energy has with BDP on the issue of can we get them to put in them BDP's materials, some like the pitch materials about the wonderful availability of offshore wind and green power and so forth. North has incentive to locate so I understand there's regular monthly sessions out with PDP and some that can be raised, and I can be helpful in drafting some language.
So meeting on this particular topic.
Okay. If we do have a grudging awareness, I'm sure that won't be grudging, but that the BDP will be willing to have some sort of insert some of the materials that's in the program. So,
Just to say that there's system to go.
well, it's just like they're so busy on so many fronts. And that is more not in principle. So we can help you. And then, oh, okay. No, it's not in there now.
I missed that last comment.
I'm just saying it's not, there's nothing because there's if you were in the supply chain type industries, there's
Oh, base replacement.
for located in Virginia. But if you're an off taker, there's nothing really that talks about the availability.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have put that.
It's like, wow.
So that's the one box. If we can help them, we can just, just be a paragraph and not longer otherwise pitch document.
Right, well, VDP has materials that are responsive to large companies that they would like to attract and large companies that are considering expansion already here. To respond to that, a lot of them say we want assurance that we can be 100% net carbon neutral on whatever date our goal is, 2035, a lot of them. So they're used to responding to that and dealing with that. Heretofore, it's been mostly sold. Because there wasn't anything to sell. But so I don't think it's alien to them. They maybe don't have what we were thinking about that Virginia Energy could do is show how the grid mix in Virginia will evolve to more carbon-free electrical power over the next 20 years. And depict what that 2,600 megawatts of wind would look like on the grid. That kind of tool, which is, admittedly, it's modeling what's going to happen. It's not a guarantee that it will happen, but that's the kind of assistance we think we could offer that they could provide as a handout, really.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And as you learned, hard to make inroads with the military on it. They have all these orders, but they also are they have budgetary constraints too. So they want to buy that carbon-free energy at grid rate or lower if possible. Just like all of the big IT companies. They want it, but they don't want to pay a premium for it.
And that came up in my master conversation. Budget.
Yes, well, Kathy, with MEDAC, and and the conversations you have too, I mean, the folks running the bases have so many other priorities. They know their electric bill is gonna be paid.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? So for them to go out and that being a top, until it comes from the top, telling them they have to do that, that goes to the back burner. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Where it really comes from is a deputy secretary of the Navy, but each different service. DOT puts out something, each service has to do that selectively then. So if your secretary of the deputy secretary of the Navy for installations of energy would be where that came from. An example is that order came to Oceana when Lou Shager was the CO for them to build that solar panel array. Oceana doesn't use any of that energy because it can't connect to their grid. So they have solar panels on their installation, but they can't use any of that power. So you've got grid issues of what kind of power they can take. There's those issues, but really your oversight is going to come from the secretariat level, not Sonoma, not your installation COs. It's going to have to be directed from the second.
Yeah, and, you know, it seems like if you're gonna do an EO, you might, have some proposal for legislation, but going out for 30 years to other agencies. That's the moment. So. Well, that's sort of the on the front lines update. I don't know whether we need to now inform what we just talked about in the annual report, but instead of talking about industry barriers, we can conform that to the provide recommendation language. And does that sound right?
The purpose of the white paper, who will the white paper go to? Who is our audience? Is this to give to legislators so they know what some of these things are specific to offshore wind? So I need to know the audience to understand that directive. That
Well, Al, correct me if I'm wrong, the white paper is an attachment to the annual report, but it's actually our specific recommendations. It's essentially, to the General Assembly, to the Director of Energy through the Energy, is that correct?
Not an attachment to the annual report. The whole point of pared down the annual report was to not require review of.
Yep.
Lots. So I think we're a big audience, and the wind team of Virginia.
The offshore wind coordination team, the governor's team.
Coordination team, the governor's office, the policy office, all of those are what these documents can influence.
for that reason, I feel like,
Recommendations.
for that reason, then I feel like these findings, that audience needs to know what we've uncovered, what the findings are, what concerns are. So as is, maybe tidying up a bit, but I think that's what you have here is probably appropriate to be reported to that audience.
Right. I would just add that I would see white papers being submitted as objectives, workshops, and the committees provide their reports, and we vote on actual recommendations, actual items, and then send them to DOE. Take and share
Yeah, that's what I think.
throughout the year, not just once a year, but I mean, as continual, yeah.
Right, like for example, so this white paper that we'll clean up and adopt is essentially would go up, because with the two items we talked about, R&D and then, PPA barriers and pathways type thing. But we also know, we'll hear shortly, so Eileen's also digging into one of the action items on workforce. So once some of that gets further developed and massaged, that would probably be another one pager of actionable items. So we're feeding information up the chain of like, we did the work, here's what we think, execute or chuck it in the trash. It's up to you.
It's words.
No, but I mean, I'll correct me if I'm wrong. Al, it's one of those things where for us to be passing this up the chain, and it's more for the internal folks, and I'd rather them filter it unless we're making a very specific budget or policy ask. Go ahead.
Back on what Eileen just was asking, as I wrote down here is, we know that the election this year is going to be quite interesting.
Yeah.
All 140 seats up. So I was gonna ask the question is, as we're doing this and we're coming to understandings and we're creating white papers, what response, is it appropriate for VALA members to make themselves available if there is a new, especially for the newly electeds, to be able to, I know BMA takes them on tours and the board takes them on tours, all those kind of things. But is it possible to make us available that if they have questions specific to offshore wind, just to ask us questions, or is that just
So,
not part of what we should be doing?
My thought, and again, Al, correct me if I'm wrong, this is gonna sound very rank and file,
It's okay.
but being that FAUDA works for Virginia Energy and we have the director of energy now, who is our boss in this case. So I'd want all this to go up and be filtered through if that's something they want to do. Now, I pause there because yes, when I leave this meeting and I put my VMA hat back on, when you do Sierra Club hat, when you do whomever, you guys can do whatever you want in terms of talking with legislators. But as far as the FAUDA position, I wouldn't want to be in a situation where we're pumping stuff as FAUDA to the General Assembly if in a freak occurrence, it's not alignment with what the department and administration wants to do. Al, is that?
I think that's pretty well said, and we got a slide on that, at the first R&D committee meeting. And, basically it boils down to policy at the legislative level is very dynamic and fast changing. And so the administration would appreciate very much that comes to them, not directly. What is from the ballot? Will said, you each have your own private lives as well, and sometimes you may not be in alignment with the administration, but at least when you're doing that, you shouldn't never do that, by the way. But by some, strange alignment of the stars, you have to. It shouldn't be as a representative from the authority.
Yeah, I agree. Eileen.
I had a call with Skip Estes, who works for the policy office.
Yeah.
And just kind of following up, their plan, and this was back in June.
Lots changed.
Following up on a lot of the governor's amendments to Senator Lott's bill regarding procurement, offshore wind procurement. We are going to be, a priority of that is the standalone bill. So I see, a lot of your, because it's on procurement, a lot of your research being very informative to the drafting of that bill and the fine tuning of that. That's why I mentioned, which I want to confirm, this will be finding it, make sure that.
Frankly, I was not aware of the white paper would even be voted on about it, and certainly did not know what the roundup would be, but now I understand more. I don't know whether it's.
Well, the goal here to back to your comment about helping with legislation. I think that's the point of kind of some of the things we've shared here, what goes in the white paper, what now Al and the team has, and Chris sits on the offshore wind coordination team, and they're working with the policy office. They've now heard all of this. And then so my thought is they're doing what they're doing behind closed doors on our behalf, because we've now handed all that over so that they can make the sausage, as they say, on their own policy. And not per se needing for us to call a meeting
Right.
to talk about what we just talked about with them. So.
In light of that, I almost feel like the fourth bullet point we should just strike, because if there's already action in terms of what's going on.
It is a barrier. We need to leave it in there.
Well,
Yeah, I would leave.
That's part of your reporting hours.
at least to explain why.
Okay, sure.
Sure.
It's the Northeast and Virginia. I think maybe if anything, we should generalize this, say pursue consideration of legislation that we develop appropriate renewable energy certificate mechanisms applicable to Virginia. As opposed to ORACs, that's just some peg with Maryland and New York and so forth. So I think we don't want to be ahead of or at odds with what the administration is thinking about. The last one, obviously, that was government was active in that one last session, and it sounds like they're going to give a push for that as well in terms of competitive procurement of offshore wind. So I would, like what I'm hearing, I would like to generalize that.
Sure.
And otherwise, just to change the heading to whatever pathways to having a recommendation.
Yeah, I would call it PPA barriers and pathways, or just something so general. I mean, I don't want to. Or is that not what you were thinking?
I think, I would say that there's, because it's just going to do this. It's, I don't know, it's a lot of different things.
Right.
So I would not say PPAs, but that's just like
Yep.
a piece of the puzzle. Where, maybe it's commercial and legislative barriers. Or
Pathways and barriers.
Or just that? Yeah.
pathways and barriers.
Yeah, that is.
Sure, let's call it that.
I'm fine with it.
Industry, pathways and barriers.
Either's fine. I think it conveys what we're talking about.
Yeah, offshore wind pathways and barriers.
What do you think, Howard?
I say offshore wind.
Offshore wind pathways.
Pathways and barriers.
Got it.
It's a mystical thing.
Yep. Well, Howard, I want to thank you and, Kathy, there's a lot of work that's gone on in this year. And these were the two first ones we did, kind of getting these two items forward. And, Eileen had asked specifically, hey, give me some time to work through some stuff. Otherwise, that would have been the third one. That would have been all in tandem. But now Eileen's going to talk about, here in a second, what's going on with workforce, so we can do the same thing. And I'm happy to see that I think we figured out, remember last year, how much fun we had talking about how we were actually going to do stuff. And it's like we figured out a way to do stuff, how to have meetings, how to do what we're doing. And it seems like this model is working well. Oh, well, my job is to keep us on time on the agenda. So any other questions specific to what you've heard on updates and the white paper? If you haven't figured it out, the white paper is a summation of everything. You just. Okay. What I would like to do, similar to what we've done before, I would like to move that we allow Virginia Energy clean this up with all the things we've talked about, right? And we don't need to see it again, but that we also adopt this white paper as recommendations that will go up through the Department of Energy on behalf of VALA. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, fantastic. We have a white paper, folks.
Thank you.
All right, now turning it over to Eileen, who has, again, was volunteered to take point on the workforce portion of our action items out of the work plan. And I know she's been doing a lot of great work behind the scenes, kind of exploring and going to different events and meeting with different people. So Eileen, the floor is yours.
All right, well, first step, I'm understanding is to do that SWOT analysis. So this is SWOT standing for strength. This is opportunities and threats. I thought it was SWOT as in strengths or weaknesses, advantages and threats. So if the opportunities sound more like advantages, that's SWOT versus SWOT.
I like it.
So this is a little bit of an editing reiteration, the goal that's in our documents, but it's to support the development of an offshore wind workforce that brings jobs and clean energy to the Mid-Atlantic region while providing economic opportunities for disadvantaged coastal communities, and we added in veterans and local workers in there as our goal. So the strengths, one of the strengths is the potential for offshore wind to support the creation of jobs in Virginia. Stating the obvious that we all know, with both the CVOW and the Kitty Hawk project and future leases in the central Atlantic, Hampton Roads is developing a foundation to become the East Coast preeminent offshore wind staging and marshaling port, and setting up to be a major hub for the offshore wind industry. And with that, there is great potential.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You want to use the slides?
Oh, how do I do that?
We can,
Just a little advance if you need it.
Yeah,
Yeah, click it right here if you want on slides.
I'll just say, well, next.
Next one.
Taking it.
Oh, it's fingers.
Promise I'd hit next.
I didn't take it.
oh, your screen is showing it, but it's.
Go ahead, Eileen, we'll figure it out.
All right, so in the second strength, there is a very large, almost 200, about 200, and diverse array of stakeholders that are involved. There's involved in offshore wind from reps to the K through 12 school districts, community colleges, trade schools, universities, workforce councils, NGOs, business alliances, etc. There's multiple training and educational programs are being identified and additional curriculum developed to leverage the skills that currently exist in one of the nation's largest maritime workforce. And I'll add into the $11 million EBA Good Jobs Challenge Grant award to Hampton Roads Workforce Council. Thank you, Steve. To support 20 outreach specialists that will be working specifically in the Hampton Roads localities to engage one-on-one with individuals in these communities, and offshore wind is part of that conversation. It is a maritime grant, but offshore wind is a part of that conversation. We are very labor strong. Most installation and staging jobs will be from union representative employees, and NABTU, the National North American Building Trades Union, and the Virginia affiliated Virginia Rate Building Trades are positioned to train workers through their existing apprenticeships programs where workers earn great wages and while being trained. One of our other strengths is the big story we have to tell, because we are indeed Virginia is leading the nation. We have the first project in the nation in federal waters, and we will have one of the first of the commercial projects out soon. So Virginia is the leader. There is bipartisan support for offshore wind. Most of the buy-in spending coming to offshore wind is related to jobs. Is with bipartisan support for job creation in Virginia. Continuous strengths. We do have commitments for diversity hiring and for local hiring. These are commitments both with the Virginia Clean Economy Act and also with Dominion, the CVOW stipulations that the SCC imposed, and then also the Bowen leases, future Bowen leases have lease stipulations in them that support both workforce development and supply chain investments by whoever the winning developer is. And then also, like I said before, Bowen is queued to offer additional offshore wind lease salaries in the Mid-Atlantic. So there will be hundreds of turbines coming to the Mid-Atlantic area. And with Hampton Roads as the hub for the Mid-Atlantic area, this will spell out to be a tremendous number of jobs in our area. Moving on to weaknesses, there is a tremendous need for more promotion of the jobs and training opportunities, especially within disadvantaged communities. While there's over 10,000 individuals that have been touched regarding the clean energy career opportunities needed for offshore wind, and that is that 10,000 is a Dominion number that they gave to me as far as how much they touched on clean energy career opportunities needed in offshore wind. The Hampton Roads Access Study provides a list of those jobs A lot of people unfortunately don't know about offshore wind still and or what those jobs look like. We need more coordination and leadership at the state level. Certain amount of but we're optimistic about that, especially with the offshore wind focus of the. We're hoping that there is an offshore wind, a high level priority made by the new Department of Workforce Development and Advancement that being organized and centralized instead of being spread out over a number of agencies and departments. That there is that localized director and department, and that they make a priority of offshore wind. And that is a weakness of ours, is we don't have that leadership. Need for more GWO training in maritime welding in particular. There's a lack of local Hampton Roads GWO, the Global Wind Organization training, especially the life saving and the sea survival certification programs. And I did put a note in here that Siemens Gamesa mentioned at a recent symposium on jobs that we had that they would prefer to put their new hires through their preferred GWO training program. And I also made a note, I've had conversations with folks that do the welding. There is a specific type of welding. It can't be just the general welding that's offered in a lot of community colleges and trade programs, but it needs to be a specialized marine welding training. Also, there is a need for more local pre-employment and pre-apprenticeship and coordination of wraparound services. These are for better, and also for other promotion of those programs and those wraparound services, especially in impacted communities in need. And noted also was the need for individuals to have to pass a background check is a huge impediment for people to these jobs. So moving on to opportunities / advantages. Offshore wind employs a very wide range of workers. Offshore wind is a maritime industry, which is employs many of the same skill sets and experience in shipbuilding and other maritime activities, which Hampton Roads is very well known for and very well suited in. There's a large veteran population looking to transition to civilian employment, and they are particularly well suited to transition to the offshore wind industry. There are large employers in this particular space, specifically Dominion and Siemens Gamesa. And there's a very long history of stakeholders all working together, very collaborative. It's almost like a family. Everybody is really on the same page and working together and very interested in working together. We don't have any, differences of opinions. Everybody I think is on the same page and wants to work together on this. So definitely that is a very huge opportunity. I actually put that one in the category of strengths, is that we are a large body that is really pulling together and have been doing so since 2009. So moving on to threats, the worker shortage. The shipbuilding industry in Hampton Roads has a 5,000 job deficiency. Worker shortage involves welders, pipe fitters, machinists. We have the jobs. This is no, we have the jobs, but not the workers. Plus, welding works in a commercial iron sense. Edit that out. So we need, there's changes that need to be made state policy as well as the uncertainty in the broader offshore wind market. Changes in state policy as well as uncertainty in the broader offshore wind market. There's difficulty in competing for OEM investments, given many Northeast states who have local content requirements. Many of those states offer incentives to in excess of $1 billion and guaranteed of future orders, making it difficult for Virginia to be competitive when seeking OEM investments. Also a threat is the high interest rates, inflationary trends, and supply chains. Current high interest rates, inflationary trends, as well as supply chain constraints in Europe resulting from the Ukraine. And then some additional workforce pipeline challenges. The HRBT, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, as well as other infrastructure projects are being built in the region, are creating additional workforce pipeline challenges and alternative career paths for individuals, many that may require a lot less training and certification. The offshore wind job is, some of the offshore wind jobs are pretty challenging. There's extended periods of time offshore and workers have to be amenable to when they're on a ship, a minimum of 2 weeks consecutively. Yeah, and then there's challenges also created by the recent offshore wind project cancellations, delays, and statements about abandoning the U.S. market by many developers and growing sentiments and litigation objecting to offshore wind in states such as New Jersey, creating uncertainty in the industry in the near-term future of the United States. So, yeah, and so I just threw out some preliminary recommendations. And these, obviously, the next step on this is to pull together a group to flesh this out so that it comes up with, some really fine-tuned and appropriate recommendations. Increase the state budget investments in offshore wind. I did find an NRAL report from October 22 that just sort of listed out how much money was invested in workforce development. And Virginia had about $580,000 in grants to build an offshore wind supply chain. Meanwhile, you'll see Maryland investing 2.8 million, Massachusetts 3.8 million, New Jersey 4.5 million, and New York 20 million. These four states are also ones that have the highest number of existing offshore wind energy workforce training programs. I thought this statistic wasn't exactly fair because do we even know how many workforce training programs are in Virginia? But nonetheless, Massachusetts have reported having 12 programs, New York 10, and New Jersey 5, and Maryland 4. I will try to follow up on that exactly as to how those are derived. They're probably state-sponsored programs. Though also we want to increase the state level coordination and prioritization of offshore wind, as I indicated before, making a priority, especially amongst the Department of Workforce Development, that offshore wind is for the idea and providing financial support for an offshore wind office. I know that that's something in the past that has been discussed in offshore wind director. So there's better coordination and promotion are the two keys that really need to be led by the state for both the coordination and the promotion. To identify the gaps in workforce and supply chain and to develop a plan to eliminate those gaps and lead the coordination of the promotion of offshore wind jobs and training programs. And then the final note to some of the folks that contributed to this report, John Larson with Dominion, Steve Cook, thank you, Hampton Roads Workforce Council, Julia Pendleton for the Southeastern Wind Coalition, and Dan Taylor for the League.
Eileen, thank you.
Eileen?
Any questions, comments? I mean, I'll tell you right up front, probably how this is going to go similar to the other ones. You all are going to be asked for comment. So not like the second, but like when you go back, chew on the document, give some thought to it, provide comments back, and that will kind of set up the next meeting when we do that. There will also likely be a subcommittee again put together, similar to what we did with R&D. So all those things are coming. Any initial thoughts, comments, feedback here for Eileen?
Eileen specifically, but maybe more Al, maybe the most knowledgeable of these positions that she remarks on within the Department of Energy were set quite a while ago. Do you have any insight of why they haven't been filled yet?
Well, they were filled at one point by deputy director appointed by the government. This administration has taken a different path. They're using the offshore wind coordination team as the focus, the fulcrum, I guess, of offshore wind policy, and depending on the Department of Energy to lead staff to that, and other agencies as well, because there were secretariats involved in the OWCT that so there are environmental agencies, economic development agencies, workforce, and others in addition to us. As far as why we haven't filled them,
Were they notified by code?
Yes. I think we're meeting the requirements in the code, but we don't have a director of offshore wind. And that wasn't approved by the. I think it's partly for budget reasons. We had a budget request for 1.6 million that was moved down to 1.2 million. And then 600,000, 640 or 60,000, I can't remember the final total, but it didn't make it. It didn't pass. So we didn't get that funding. And the offshore funding that we do have in general funds is there and is being used to pay salaries and for other needs, for contracting if we do that. We did much before ODU for 3 years.
Are we doing anything currently?
Anything currently
Have
about
contract and consulting, similar to ODU? What are we doing? What is the Department of Energy paying for in the realm of offshore wind that it is moving towards offshore wind in Virginia?
salaries of Virginia Department of Energy people?
And, okay. Yeah, who work on more than just offshore wind.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yes. But yeah,
Yeah, we don't have a single.
I will say they are contributing resources as well towards offshore wind conferences, and trying
like
to,
when it was last.
I don't know about that one, but
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
so with the business network, but I don't know that was a DOE or a Commonwealth.
Yes.
That's the governor's offshore. Department of Energy.
Well, it's
Staffs.
staffs. I mean,
What?
The coordination team.
well, Chelsea leads it and we bring all the different, as every secretary.
Virginia Energy does a lot, but we're not the only one. We probably do more than other agencies, but the Economic Development Partnership often presents, does analysis, provides data, provides recommendations. Port Authority, and ports in general, obviously play a big role. And Chris, Pat Kinsman, Kathy Big, are often involved at those meetings, sharing information. And what the focus is based on what the industry status is at the time. So the Siemens Energy, Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy press coverage, we had a lot of analysis over a period of weeks, and it's still ongoing. So we're doing a lot of that, both partnership and the Port Authority also have been involved in that. Whatever the topic of the day is, sometimes we'll hijack it, but the intent of it is the long-term coordination, march forward to achieve the goals of the administration in the energy plan with the offshore wind and this.
Yes,
And I'm going to switch gears, so give Al a break here. I'd like to, and Steve's here, so he may be able to answer some of these questions if we're good to call in. But what in your labor, if you don't know it, labor strong, it says earn great wages. Do we have a number that goes with what a great wage is? I mean, I like what I'm making right now, but I could have a greater wage. I know that, but
It's industry specific. I mean, it really, you can, I mean, a great wage is depending on what you're doing really and what you're. $15 right now seems to be kind of where everybody's starting, and that's from
hourly.
retail, on up. So you often hear, in the offshore wind industry that it is definitely higher than that. when you come in with certifications, well, then, you know,
Right.
those types.
There was a point when I was involved with Civic, when we did industry cluster things. There was a point where we said, and Brian may know this, that $50,000 a year was considered a good living wage for the Hampton Roads area at least. Is that still?
15,000?
No, 50, yeah, no, yeah,
Yeah.
50,000, okay, yeah. And then the other question is with the worker shortage that's referenced here with, you know, just shipbuilding having 50,000 job, efficient, or 5,000, excuse me. 15,
That's
sorry.
annual, by the way.
Yes, the question is, has the offshore wind coordination team discussed that? Because I assume that the Secretary of Labor is part of that coordination team. So has that come up as to how do we build an industry while another industry is a little hurt? And how do we do that?
I would say they're cognizant. I don't know of what meeting we discussed that exact topic, but it's,
Yeah.
was it? Okay, I was driving up, yeah, that, you're right, because he,
We,
Thank goodness.
yeah.
we did do an overview for that group, and there's a lot of activity right now, a lot of dollars coming into the state or coming into this region to help fortify, you know, all of those pipelines, not only for shipbuilding and ship repair, but the construction that Eileen was talking about, HRBT. These grants have wording that are consider all of these industries as part of those dollars. So that $11 million is going to help fortify some of those pipelines for all of that. So it's kind of, you know, we've got a lot of things happening now. Got a lot of money focused on the Navy and the shipbuilding part of this, that should prepare. But a lot of money coming in that's also trying to tailor it to different maritime related industries.
Well,
Not just shipbuilding and ship repair,
Yeah.
logistics and warehousing and
well,
offshore wind and
Right.
other things.
Well, and to what, one of the comments in here about the fact that, you know, they already start working, let's say they start working in the shipyard, they're making a great living wage there. And then why would they want to transition to offshore wind when those opportunities get there? Because they don't necessarily want to leave Newport News shipbuilding because it's a great gig, right? Just I call it the same as you go and get your CDL license. You're working for Amazon while you get your 2 years of experience, and then you don't want to be a long haul trucker because you get to go home every night if you're working for a delivery local. So it'll be curious to see how we get there. We promised all these jobs for offshore wind. We talked about how it is. And more jobs, more jobs, more jobs. And at the same time, we're seeing that people can't fill it. So I'm just.
so that's the thing I want to add is we don't have a jobs problem and we don't have a training problem. We have a bodies problem. And so one of the things I would recommend we add to this, and we don't have to vote on it because it's just, this is a preliminary document, but a third recommendation, because we're working at it with the VMA statewide and other groups, is this is a K-12 and marketing problem is what it is. And the idea that people just don't know these jobs are out there. And when they're finding out about them, it's a little too late. So, I mean, we've seen that it's not even a college problem. College is too late to be talking about some of these jobs. It's not a senior high school problem because that's too late. It is literally, and I've spent a lot of time with a lot of legislators over the last week around the state, and they're all loving this idea. And so I think there might even be some legislation around it of this is a no kidding middle school and below elementary school education and marketing push for all these types of jobs, because that's what it is. I mean, there's so many programs out there like the shipyard that they'll pay you, you guaranteed seat and training, guaranteed job, and they can't fill seats.
Right.
And that's just one company, and the other schools and pipelines as well, same thing. So
Public schools recognize that too.
So it's really, some of this effort is also, yes, we probably need more budget investments in some of these things. Yes, we need a little bit more coordination, but the problem is getting people to say, hey, this is cool and I want to try it, or I want to get training in it. Just my initial thought. Any other thoughts or comments on this preliminary review and Eileen? Okay, well, thank you, Eileen. I think this is great. Like I said, chew on this. If you have ideas, send them back around to the team. Because this will be, again, a deeper dive at a further meeting. We'll work on getting the subcommittee put together. So Eileen, give some thought too about who you'd like to invite to be part of the subcommittee. The good news about that is you could fill the room like we did with others with subject matter experts. So you could have 1 or 2 VADA members, but you could have as many SMEs as you want in that space. Moving on to other business. So first, I also see there's no public comment, so we'll be skipping that. I wanted to make a few comments on other business. Laura, I'm going to put you on the spot if you can do it quickly. Can you pull up the Marco portal and share screen and show the latest Central Atlantic lease areas?
I will try. Give me a minute.
I figured you are the master of Marco, so I figured, I mean, this would be a piece of cake.
Let's go.
Yeah, so while she's pulling that up, two things I want to talk about real quick. Or the first one, everything going on with the North Atlantic right whale and NOAA. So there's some proposals about increased speed reduction rules in the maritime space on the East Coast. There is an existing speed reduction rule in place, but it's in much smaller areas and it applies to vessels 65 feet and above. What happened last year, if I got this right, because we've been working on it pretty heavily, is NOAA said essentially that what we have in place right now is not working, and they're proposing even deeper and more restrictive speed reduction rules that would essentially cover the entirety of the East Coast, and it would apply also in this case to vessels between 35 and 65 feet in length. So it would add a whole new batch of vessels, specifically also high-speed craft when you think of pilot vessels and when you also think of things like CTVs. So that has a pretty big impact on offshore wind. This is not new. I'm just letting you know that the VMA, our own Virginia pilots, the Port Authority, the national pilots, and a billion other groups have been weighing in with NOAA to basically say, hey, I see what you're wanting to do here. We want to protect the right whales. We all want to protect the right whales, but this might not be the best way to go about it. So there is some legislation in place or being introduced in Congress that will essentially not fund this new effort until there's some studies in place. So it effectively stops or slows down this process until some data-based and scientifically backed, studies can be done to see about what the most effective way is going to be to protect the North Atlantic right whale. So that's underway. A lot of our congressional delegation, or there's some members of our congressional delegation that are flat out opposing the newer restrictions. I'll say, at least from the VMA standpoint, we're supportive of the let's hold off on funding this program until we can get some real informed decisions. And that's really what the maritime industry has aligned on. So just bringing that to your awareness. What Laura is now showing is the latest version of the Central Atlantic lease areas, which I know many of you have seen. This is essentially what it is going to be. The main comment I want to make here, because I'll tell you this, and this is why I love working for a trade association, because my job is just to be objective and decidedly neutral. I know there was people who were happier about this, and I know there was people who were not happy about this, right? But here we are, because what it looks like, and if you remember looking at the images before where you saw a lot of potential areas, and I think sometimes that gets people really excited when you look at a massive swath that is possible, and then it gets narrowed down to what is reasonable in this case. And that can be disappointing to people. However, really the main thing I want to say here is what we're looking at here is years worth of work and years worth of coordination with all of Virginia's stakeholders. And so I will comment from the Virginia standpoint, what we have is good because it has taken the input of commercial maritime, NASA, DOD, commercial fishing, everyone. And believe you me, and I know Laura was part of these conversations, a lot of people here have been part of these conversations. This was a lot of work getting to this point where we have some additional lease areas that seem to make sense for BOEM and all of other Virginia's maritime interests. So just want to provide some feedback on that because like I said, I've personally been working on this for years as part of my day job.
You said years of work. It's decades. I mean, only these three.
Well, the new version of what I'm talking about, the new
I know,
version of what I'm talking about.
But just there's decades of work.
Yeah.
We'll all be retired. and They'll be.
Eileen?
Sent out a save the date notice yesterday for
Yep.
Central Oklahoma Task Force meeting October 10th. It's a virtual.
Those are my favorite. I say that in jest, but because yeah, they're like 6 hours long and I sit there and just listen the whole time to everybody make comments. But from what I understand, like I said, this is likely gonna be it. These shapes don't tend to get bigger. They tend to get smaller, but from what I understand, everyone is happy with this for the most part in Virginia. So I want to really share that with you. A lot of work goes into creating some shapes. And then someone has to pick what colors they are, right? And so that's, I think Laura does that. She just arbitrarily picks the colors and shape. So that's all really I had for some other business that I wanted to share with you all. I'll also say, so yes, IPF next year is going to be in New Orleans, so that's going to be a good time. But I'm also talking with B now. It definitely looks like they're going to bring ports and vessels back up here in 2024. So we're doing our favorite thing where we fight over hotels and dates. So
When was your last 22?
yeah, last year it was here, and then this year they're in the Gulf. Yeah. And then now they're going to come back up here, from what I understand. It's the Business Network of Offshore Wind has a smaller conference for offshore wind around ports and vessels, specifically focusing on that. And we had it here last year. So that's all I have, unless there's any other business or closing remarks.
I'll just make a quick comment. I appreciate Eileen mentioned October 10th, that notice coming out yesterday from BOEM. And also just to mention upcoming, a number of folks from Virginia will be in Boston for the American Clean Power Association Offshore Wind Conference, which will be interesting, very timely with all of the activity taking place in wind. So Virginia, Hampton Roads will have a presence exhibiting. I know Steve Cook from Workforce Council will be there, along with a couple other stakeholders. I will be participating on a panel on the Wednesday on the offshore wind supply chain and be able to showcase, I think, with other ports, what's going on. And obviously here in Virginia, selfishly, we have, I think, the best story to share with a really obviously sizable opportunity, not just at PMT, and I will talk about PMT, but even thinking about across the river at Fairwinds Landing and what they're doing there for the op space with Dominion. So good story to carry out to the folks along the East Coast of what Virginia's doing here in offshore wind.
That slide, the Department of Energy.
Al should show us, yeah. Can you
There
remember
was
the
you had a slide deck, a deck. that-
administration priorities slide that?
Can you find it?
I thought you had it up there at one point.
Yeah.
Okay, she just wants to.
We'll email it around.
Any other business comments from the board?
I can't find the thing, but B now is doing anything here with Virgin Beach. I want to say it's September 21st, but my brain is not, or is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're doing foundation of blades.
They're doing something over at it's at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Bronx Center.
Yeah.
They're doing
Yeah,
some
they're doing
things there.
foundation.
I'm sorry, I can't find the date on my calendar, but I'll make sure everybody has that.
Page sentence.
And real quickly, we've covered 3 objectives. The 4th objective, will we have a report on that? What coming for that soon?
Which board?
Worked about it.
Yeah, so, and I think we talked about this where stepping back, when we looked at the objectives, there's about 2 or 3 of them. They're a little vague, but they're also like very well handled, And so we focused on the initial 3 that needed a deeper dive from this group. So I'd probably have to go look, but it would be like on the supply chain thing, for example. I mean, me, Chris, the Alliance, VEDP, we're living that all the time. So I think maybe a report.
Yeah, say a report out.
It's probably better than like doing a deeper dive. I don't plan to do a subcommittee on it. I don't plan to do a SWAT or anything like that, just because of where we are with it. But,
Maybe our first meeting in 2024, and we can block off enough time for almost multiple participants in that supply chain effort.
Yeah.
Could present almost like we had in the subcommittee when
Right.
we had all of those.
yeah, we
Yeah.
like a quick
So
update.
if there's anything that we can support or not support or do workarounds, there certainly have to be some threats or something that
Question.
about it.
What's coming up for
Action
the
on-
general assembly?
action on-
Yeah, legislation that might impact those.
Well, then even like the site, well, I know one of the objectives too is like
CT.
deconfliction site analysis. I mean, that graph that we just showed is essentially that culmination so far, and as long as it's playing defense, stuff like that's what keeps me up right now. It's like when we finally have kind of got to a place, it's like not messing it up, because if it gets messed up, we literally go back like several years to the starting point. So,
You think what's facing us in September?
yeah. Much. So,
Maybe shoot some mileage.
yeah.
That's a good analogy, Howard. That is spot on.
Make sure that's in the minute.
Yeah. Current market.
So it's the next meeting, yeah, we could do a supply chain update. And we can look at it.
So Will, do we have some sense of when that next meeting will be? You think in January or?
It could be, I mean, that's something we could take for action is, now that you're retired, you have tons of time. I'm sure you're tired, so, but we can give it the team and look at some respective dates.
Yeah.
It could also be virtual. We have that,
Or do we do it, make it our one Richmond meeting? Because
The one-
we do it in
Yeah,
your
the
session.
department is gonna be getting busy with all the things they're gonna have
Going
to
on
prep
with
for
session.
legislators. So we should either try to do it before the election or, but that's like in a month, yeah.
no, we're not doing another, I don't see us doing another meeting
In
this
October,
year.
no. Oh, in this year at all, okay.
Well, look at
We don't.
I will say this, let me say this, because the main committee, our main board may not meet again this year, but again, the committees and subcommittees can meet if they, so, to continue certain work efforts.
We can send out 4 doodle polls if you want for the 4 meetings. Get them on calendars all year ahead.
Okay, last call, anything anybody wants to share, it's burning in your heart. Meeting's adjourned, thank you very much.
You.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy Massachusetts.
Thank you. Going to the Whaling Museum, so that should be fun.
Oh, fun.
All right. Bye, everybody.
See ya.